something extraordinary happens when desperation meets devotion. Right at this very moment, countless souls across the globe are whispering the same sacred name, Saint Anthony of Padua. Their voices carry the weight of urgent needs, lost dreams, and hearts that refuse to surrender hope. But here's what most people don't understand about connecting with this beloved saint. It's not just about asking for help. It's about opening yourself to receive miracles that often come disguised as ordinary moments. If you found your way to this sacred space today, it's no accident. Whether you're searching for something precious you've lost, seeking divine intervention in a seemingly impossible situation, or yearning for a breakthrough that feels just beyond your reach, Saint Anthony is already listening. He's been waiting for you to arrive at this exact moment. Before we dive deeper into this powerful encounter with one of heaven's most compassionate intercessors, I want you to do something that will multiply the grace flowing through this prayer time. Hit that like button right now, not just for this video, but as a declaration of faith that miracles are possible in your life. Share this with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to subscribe, because together, we're building a community of believers who refuse to give up on God's goodness. The ancient walls of countless churches worldwide bear witness to an astonishing truth. Saint Anthony of Padua answers prayers with a swiftness that leaves even seasoned believers speechless. But what makes him so uniquely powerful? What draws millions to seek his intercession when other prayers seem to hit an invisible ceiling? The answer lies not in superstition or religious folklore, but in something far more profound. Saint Anthony possessed an extraordinary gift during his earthly life, the ability to see straight into the heart of human suffering and respond with divine precision. This same supernatural insight continues to flow through his heavenly intercession today. Consider Sarah from Chicago, who had been searching for her wedding ring for 3 agonizing months. It wasn't just jewelry. It held her grandmother's diamond and represented a family legacy spanning 4 generations. After countless prayers to various saints yielded nothing, she finally turned to Saint Anthony with desperate sincerity. Within 24 hours, her toddler pointed to a book on a high shelf she'd never thought to check. There, perfectly preserved between pages she hadn't opened in years, lay her precious ring. But was this mere coincidence, or something far more mysterious at work? Dr. Maria Rodriguez, a cardiologist in Madrid, would tell you it's undoubtedly the latter. Facing a medical malpractice lawsuit that threatened to destroy her career over a patient complication that wasn't her fault, she spent sleepless nights wondering if 15 years of helping others would end in disgrace. Traditional prayers felt hollow, as if her words were evaporating before reaching heaven. Then her elderly patient, Mrs. Carmen, whispered something that changed everything. "Doctor, Saint Anthony doesn't just find lost objects, he finds lost hope." That night, Maria knelt before a small statue of Saint Anthony in her home chapel. She didn't recite formal prayers or make elaborate promises. Instead, she simply opened her heart and let her anguish flow freely. "Saint Anthony," she whispered, "I'm lost in this darkness. Show me the way forward." 3 days later, the hospital's security team discovered CCTV footage they had previously overlooked. Clear evidence that vindicated Maria completely and revealed the true cause of the patient's complications. The lawsuit was dismissed, but more importantly, Maria's faith was transformed from mere belief into unshakable conviction. What happened in those 3 days between Maria's prayer and her vindication? Why do some prayers to Saint Anthony produce results so quickly they seem almost supernatural, while others require longer periods of patient waiting? The secret lies in understanding something most people miss entirely about this remarkable saint. Saint Anthony doesn't just intercede for our requests. He transforms our capacity to receive God's answers. When we truly connect with His Spirit, something shifts in our spiritual receptivity. We become aligned with divine timing in ways that can only be described as miraculous. But here's where many believers make a crucial mistake. They approach Saint Anthony like a spiritual vending machine. Insert prayer, expect immediate result. This mechanical approach often leads to disappointment and weakened faith. The saints don't operate according to our human schedules or limited understanding of what we truly need. Instead, authentic connection with Saint Anthony requires what spiritual masters call holy vulnerability, the courage to expose our deepest fears and most desperate needs to heaven's compassion. It's about releasing our death grip on specific outcomes and trusting that divine love will provide something even better than what we originally requested. This shift in approach can be challenging for our controlling human nature. We want guarantees, timelines, and detailed explanations of how our prayers will be answered. But miracles rarely work that way. They emerge from the sacred space between human faith and divine mystery. Think about the last time you experienced something truly miraculous in your life. Chances are it didn't unfold exactly as you expected. The miracle probably came wrapped in circumstances you never would have chosen, delivered by people you never thought would help, arriving at a moment when you least expected divine intervention. This unpredictability isn't a flaw in how heaven operates. It's actually proof of a love so vast and creative that it surpasses our limited imagination. Saint Anthony understood this deeply during his earthly ministry, which is why his heavenly intercession carries such transformative power. As we prepare to enter into powerful prayer with this beloved saint, you're about to discover something that will revolutionize how you approach not just this prayer time, but every interaction with the divine realm. The key isn't in the words you speak, it's in the condition of your heart when you speak them. The most powerful prayers to Saint Anthony don't begin with perfect faith. They begin with honest desperation. In the quiet corners of emergency rooms, in the sleepless hours before dawn, in the moments when human solutions have been exhausted, something beautiful happens. The pretense falls away, religious formalities dissolve, and raw human need reaches directly toward heaven. This is exactly where Saint Anthony's power shines brightest. He specializes in meeting us at our breaking points, in those sacred spaces where we finally stop trying to manage God and simply surrender to grace. James, a construction foreman in Detroit, discovered this truth in the most unlikely way. When his company's payroll account was hacked and 6 months of employee wages vanished into cyberspace, he faced more than financial ruin. He looked into the eyes of 23 families depending on those missing paychecks and saw his own failure reflected back. The FBI offered little hope of recovery. His lawyer suggested bankruptcy. His wife, though supportive, couldn't hide her fear about their own mortgage payments. But something his grandmother had whispered to him decades earlier suddenly surfaced from the depths of his memory. Saint Anthony finds what's lost, mijo, but first you have to be willing to lose everything else that doesn't matter. At the time, 8-year-old James had rolled his eyes at what seemed like confusing religious talk. But standing in his empty office at midnight, staring at bank statements that showed impossible zeros where substantial numbers should have been, those words blazed with new meaning. He didn't pray elegantly that night. He didn't light candles, assume devotional postures, or recite memorized prayers. Instead, he collapsed into his desk chair and let the weight of absolute helplessness wash over him. "Saint Anthony," he finally managed, "I don't know how to fix this. These families are counting on me, and I've got nothing left to give them. Nothing." What happened next challenges everything we think we know about how prayers are answered. The very next morning, James received a call from a number he didn't recognize. The voice on the other end belonged to a cybersecurity specialist whose daughter attended the same school as James's youngest child. Somehow, and she couldn't explain how, she had become aware of his situation and felt compelled to offer her services free of charge. Within 48 hours, she had traced the stolen funds and initiated recovery procedures that the FBI had deemed impossible. But here's the part that left James speechless. She had never heard about his financial crisis from any human source. No one in his family had mentioned it at school. No news reports existed. She simply felt an overwhelming urge to help a man she barely knew at exactly the moment he needed help most. Was this Saint Anthony's intercession at work? Or simply an extraordinary coincidence? The distinction becomes irrelevant when you understand how divine intervention actually operates in our world. Heaven doesn't violate natural laws. It orchestrates circumstances in ways that reveal supernatural love, working through ordinary channels. Saints like Anthony become conduits for this orchestration, connecting desperate human needs with available divine solutions. But timing plays a crucial role in how these connections unfold. Notice that James's breakthrough came not after months of anxious prayer, but immediately after he reached genuine surrender. This isn't because Saint Anthony rewards desperation. It's because desperation finally clears away the spiritual static that often blocks our reception of heavenly help. Consider what typically happens when we first encounter a serious problem. We begin with confidence in our own abilities, seeking logical solutions and applying learned strategies. When those approaches fail, we escalate to more intense human efforts, consulting experts, exploring alternatives, pushing harder against obstacles. Only when complete exhaustion sets in do we finally turn to prayer with genuine openness to solutions beyond our control or understanding. This progression isn't weakness, it's how most humans naturally process crisis. But understanding it can help us reach that state of receptive surrender more quickly, allowing Saint Anthony's intercession to work in our lives sooner rather than later. The challenge is that genuine surrender can't be faked or forced. Your heart knows the difference between saying, "I surrender," while secretly maintaining backup plans, and truly releasing control into divine hands. Saint Anthony's most powerful interventions consistently occur when we've moved beyond spiritual pretense into authentic vulnerability. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood aspects of praying with saints. Many people assume that saints respond more favorably to formal prayers, elaborate devotions, or displays of religious knowledge. But the opposite is often true. Saints like Anthony were drawn to simplicity and authenticity during their earthly lives, and these same qualities attract their heavenly attention today. Think about your own relationships. When someone approaches you with obvious neediness but tries to hide it behind formal language and artificial composure, don't you find yourself wanting to say, "Just tell me what's really wrong"? Saints experience something similar when we approach them with religious performances instead of honest hearts. This doesn't mean that traditional prayers and devotions lack value. They provide structure, connect us with centuries of faithful believers, and offer beautiful language for expressing our deepest longings. But they become most powerful when they serve as vehicles for authentic communication rather than substitutes for it. Maria Elena, a nurse in Phoenix, learned this lesson in a way that transformed not just her prayer life, but her entire relationship with faith. When her teenage son began experimenting with dangerous drugs, she initially responded with an arsenal of traditional prayers, novenas, and religious practices. She lit candles, attended extra masses, and recited every prayer to Saint Anthony she could find online. For months, nothing changed. Her son's behavior continued deteriorating, and her prayers felt increasingly hollow. One evening, after discovering drug paraphernalia in his bedroom, she found herself screaming at a statue of Saint Anthony in frustration. "Why aren't you helping us? I've done everything the prayer books say to do." In that moment of raw honesty, something shifted. Instead of continuing her religious routine, she simply sat with the saint in silence, letting her terror for her son's future fill the space between them. No words, no formal petitions, just a mother's anguish meeting a saint's compassion. The breakthrough came not through dramatic intervention, but through a series of seemingly unrelated events that began unfolding within days. Her son's best friend, who she'd never particularly liked, suddenly began showing interest in healthier activities. A new teacher at school, himself a former addict, recognized the warning signs and quietly began mentoring her son. A free counseling program became available at their community center at exactly the moment she'd exhausted their savings on ineffective therapy. Were these coincidences, Or was Saint Anthony orchestrating a complex web of interventions that honored both her son's free will and her desperate need for help? The beauty of authentic spiritual experience is that such questions become secondary to gratitude. When we witness our prayers being answered through channels we never could have imagined, our focus shifts from analyzing the mechanics to marveling at the love. But this raises another crucial point about connecting with Saint Anthony's intercession. His help often comes through human agents, people who suddenly feel moved to offer assistance, share information, or provide resources at precisely the right moment. This is why maintaining an attitude of openness to unexpected sources of help becomes essential when we're seeking his intervention. How many divine solutions do we miss because they don't arrive through the channels we're watching? How often does Saint Anthony arrange exactly the help we need, only to have us overlook it because it doesn't match our preconceptions about how miracles should appear? As we move deeper into our time of prayer with this powerful saint, keep this truth close to your heart. Saint Anthony's greatest miracles often masquerade as ordinary kindness, unexpected opportunities, and chance encounters that aren't chance at all. Your willingness to recognize and receive help through humble human channels may be the key that unlocks the very breakthrough you're seeking. Every genuine miracle speaks a language most people never learn to understand. It's not written in dramatic supernatural phenomena or violation of natural laws, but in the subtle art of divine timing, unexpected connections, and circumstances that align in ways that defy statistical probability. Saint Anthony has mastered this hidden language, and those who learn to recognize his signature interventions find themselves living in a world where the impossible becomes routine. Dr. Robert Chen, an emergency physician in Seattle, witnessed this firsthand during one of the most challenging periods of his career. The hospital was facing critical staff shortages, patient mortality rates were climbing, and his own exhaustion had reached dangerous levels. After working 18-hour shifts for 3 consecutive weeks, he found himself making medical errors that could have cost lives. The breaking point came when he misread a medication dosage and nearly administered a potentially fatal dose to a cardiac patient. Only the alert intervention of a senior nurse prevented tragedy. That night, Dr. Chen sat in his car in the hospital parking lot, too ashamed to go home to his family, too tired to think clearly about solutions. He'd never been particularly religious, but desperate circumstances had a way of opening doors to possibilities he'd previously dismissed. His grandmother's small Saint Anthony medal, which he'd carried in his wallet for 20 years without really thinking about it, suddenly felt significant in his trembling hands. "I don't even know how to do this," he whispered into the darkness of his car. "But if you're real, if you actually help people, I need help. Not just for me, for every patient who depends on me being better than I am right now." What happened next illustrates perfectly how Saint Anthony's intercession operates through the hidden language of divine coordination. The following morning, Dr. Chen received an unexpected call from Dr. Sarah Martinez, a colleague he hadn't spoken to in over a year. She had just relocated to Seattle and was looking for temporary work while waiting for her permanent position to begin. Without any knowledge of his situation, she wondered if his hospital needed additional emergency room coverage. That same day, a pharmaceutical company representative stopped by to inform the staff about a new medication tracking system that would virtually eliminate dosage errors. The pilot program was free, and Dr. Chen's hospital was randomly selected to participate. But the most remarkable part came that afternoon. A patient brought in after a car accident turned out to be a sleep specialist who noticed Dr. Chen's obvious symptoms of chronic fatigue. During their conversation, while she waited for X-ray results, she mentioned a new research study on physician wellness that offered comprehensive support for overworked medical professionals. The program had just opened enrollment, and she encouraged him to apply. Within 72 hours of his desperate prayer, Dr. Chen found himself with additional staffing support, better safety systems, and access to resources that directly addressed the root causes of his crisis. Each solution arrived through completely separate channels, but together they formed a comprehensive answer to needs he hadn't even known how to articulate. But here's what makes this story particularly significant. None of these developments violated natural laws or required supernatural intervention in the dramatic sense. They were simply the right people, offering the right solutions at exactly the right moment, coordinated with a precision that spoke of intelligent, loving design. This is Saint Anthony's preferred method of operation. Rather than manipulating reality to force specific outcomes, he seems to work within existing possibilities, guiding circumstances and inspirations in ways that create exactly what we need, when we need it most. Understanding this approach can transform how we watch for answers to our prayers. Instead of looking for obvious miracles that announce themselves with fanfare, we begin noticing the elegant choreography of ordinary events that produce extraordinary results. But recognizing this hidden language requires developing what spiritual teachers call eyes of faith, the ability to see divine love at work in circumstances that skeptics would dismiss as coincidence. This doesn't mean abandoning critical thinking or attributing every positive event to miraculous intervention. It means maintaining openness to the possibility that a loving intelligence might be orchestrating events in ways that serve our highest good. Lisa Thompson, a single mother in Atlanta, developed these eyes of faith through a series of experiences that began with what seemed like devastating news. When her landlord suddenly sold the property where she'd lived with her 2 young children for 5 years, she faced eviction with only 30 days to find alternative housing in one of the most competitive rental markets in the country. With poor credit, limited income, and no savings for deposits, her prospects looked hopeless. She spent sleepless nights scrolling through rental listings she couldn't afford, calculating impossible budgets, and wondering if she'd end up living in her car with her children. On the verge of panic, she remembered something her mother used to say: "When you're lost, ask Saint Anthony to show you the way." It wasn't advice about finding lost objects. It was wisdom about finding direction when life itself felt impossible to navigate. Lisa's first prayer to Saint Anthony wasn't elegant or formal. Sitting on her couch at 2 a.m., surrounded by eviction notices and rental applications she couldn't complete, she simply said, "Saint Anthony, I'm completely lost here. I don't know how to protect my children from what's coming. Please help me find a way forward." The hidden language of miracles began speaking immediately, though Lisa almost missed the first words. The next day, her daughter's teacher mentioned casually that her own mother, a retired widow, had been considering renting out her basement apartment, but wasn't sure about dealing with strangers. Something about Lisa's situation resonated with her, and she offered to make an introduction. That same week, Lisa's car broke down, seemingly another catastrophe, but the mechanic who towed her vehicle turned out to be the son of the widow with the basement apartment. During their conversation about repair costs, he mentioned that his mother valued kindness and reliability over perfect credit scores. The apartment was perfect, affordable, in a good school district, and available immediately. But more than that, the widow, Mrs. Patterson, had lost her own daughter years earlier and found healing in helping Lisa's family create stability. Lisa moved in 2 days before her eviction deadline, but the miracles didn't stop there. Mrs. Patterson's late husband had been an electrician, and his workshop in the garage was still fully equipped. Lisa, who had always been handy but never had proper tools, was able to start a small home repair business that supplemented her income perfectly. Within 6 months, Lisa had not only found housing, but discovered a new career path that utilized skills she'd never known she possessed. Her financial situation stabilized, her children thrived in their new environment, and Mrs. Patterson became the grandmother figure their family had been missing. Looking back, Lisa could trace every breakthrough to what initially appeared to be problems or inconveniences. The eviction forced her to explore options she never would have considered. The broken car led to connections she never would have made. Even her financial struggles, which had been sources of shame, became qualifications for the very help she needed most. This is the hidden language of miracles, solutions disguised as problems, blessings wrapped in challenges, and help arriving through channels we never thought to explore. Saint Anthony seems particularly gifted at orchestrating these complex interventions that honor both our free will and divine providence. But receiving this kind of help requires maintaining what might be called radical receptivity, willingness to accept assistance from unexpected sources, openness to solutions that don't match our original plans, and trust that setbacks might actually be setups for something better than we originally requested. This radical receptivity can be challenging for our controlling human nature. We want to dictate not just what help we receive, but how and when and through whom it arrives. When we insist that our prayers be answered according to our specifications, we often block the very assistance heaven is trying to provide. Saint Anthony's intercession works most powerfully when we release our grip on specific outcomes and trust that divine love will provide what we truly need, even if it looks nothing like what we originally wanted. This doesn't mean becoming passive or failing to take appropriate action. It means taking action from a place of trust rather than desperation. As we prepare to enter into deeper prayer with Saint Anthony, remember that you're not just asking for help. You're opening yourself to receive miracles that may be disguised as ordinary human kindness, unexpected opportunities, and problems that turn out to be perfectly designed solutions. Your willingness to recognize and receive help through humble channels may be the key that unlocks extraordinary grace in your life. Are you ready to learn the hidden language of miracles? Are you prepared to see Saint Anthony's loving interventions, even when they arrive wearing work clothes instead of halos? The prayers we're about to share together have the power to open your spiritual eyes to wonders that have been surrounding you all along. In fact, I want you to do something right now that will help you recognize miracles when they appear. Leave a comment below telling us about one time in your life when what seemed like bad news eventually led to something wonderful. Share that story, not just for others to read, but as a declaration of faith that God can transform any situation for good. Your testimony might be exactly the encouragement someone else needs to keep believing in miracles. Prayer with Saint Anthony operates on principles that most people never discover because they're looking for magic instead of understanding the spiritual alchemy actually at work. True miracles don't bypass natural laws. They reveal deeper laws of divine love that transform ordinary circumstances into extraordinary solutions. When we align ourselves with these deeper principles, our prayers become vehicles for receiving help that appears supernatural but actually flows from the most natural thing of all, God's desire to help His children. This spiritual alchemy requires more than just asking for what we want. It demands a transformation in how we approach problems, how we define solutions, and how we recognize divine intervention when it appears in our lives. Saint Anthony masters this process because he understands something crucial. The miracle isn't just in getting what we ask for, it's in becoming people who can receive and recognize what heaven wants to give us. Consider the remarkable story of Michael Rodriguez, a construction contractor in Los Angeles, whose business was collapsing under the weight of unpaid invoices and delayed projects. 3 major clients had defaulted on payments totaling over $180,000. His crews were threatening to quit, and his wife was quietly researching bankruptcy attorneys. But Michael's crisis went deeper than financial pressure. For 15 years, he'd built his identity around being a successful businessman who solved problems and provided for others. Watching everything crumble felt like losing himself, not just his company. The shame of potential failure paralyzed him more than the actual financial problems. His introduction to Saint Anthony came through an unlikely source. Rico, his youngest employee, barely 21 years old and still living with his grandmother. When Rico noticed Michael's obvious distress, he offered something that surprised everyone. Not advice or solutions, but a simple prayer card worn soft from decades of handling. "My abuela always says Saint Anthony doesn't just find lost things," Rico explained quietly. "He finds lost hope. Maybe yours isn't as lost as you think." That night, Michael held the prayer card and felt foolish. He'd never been comfortable with religious practices that seemed to ask for special favors. But desperation has a way of opening doors that pride keeps locked. Instead of formal prayers, he found himself having a conversation with the saint as if speaking to a trusted friend. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong, he admitted to the silence of his office. "I work hard, treat people fairly, try to build something meaningful, but everything's falling apart, and I can't see any way forward. If you really help people find what they've lost, help me find a way to save my business without compromising who I am." The alchemy of answered prayer began immediately, though Michael didn't recognize it at first. The next morning brought a call from David Kim, an architect he'd worked with years earlier on a small residential project. David was now managing a major commercial development and needed a contractor with Michael's specific expertise. But here's what made the call extraordinary. David had originally planned to hire a larger firm, but something kept nagging at him to reach out to Michael instead. The project was substantial enough to resolve Michael's immediate cash flow problems, but it came with an unusual requirement. David needed someone willing to mentor young apprentices as part of a community development initiative. Most established contractors would have seen this as an unnecessary complication, but Michael found himself genuinely excited about the teaching opportunity. As work began, Michael discovered that mentoring these young people energized him in ways his regular business never had. Their enthusiasm reminded him why he'd entered construction in the first place, not just to make money, but to build things that mattered. One apprentice, Maria, had a natural gift for project management that perfectly complemented Michael's construction skills. Within 6 months, what had begun as a single rescue project evolved into a new business model focused on training young people while completing community projects. The work was more meaningful than anything Michael had done before, and surprisingly, it was also more profitable. The combination of skilled mentorship, enthusiastic apprentices, and community support created a competitive advantage he'd never anticipated. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't in Michael's business. It was in his understanding of what success actually meant. The crisis that had threatened to destroy everything he'd built ultimately revealed that what he'd built wasn't what he really wanted anyway. Saint Anthony hadn't just saved his company, he'd helped Michael discover a more authentic version of himself. This illustrates a crucial principle in the alchemy of answered prayer. Sometimes our biggest problems exist to redirect us toward our truest purposes. Saint Anthony's intercession often works by revealing opportunities that align with who we're meant to become, not just who we think we are. But this alchemical process requires what spiritual teachers call cooperative grace, our willingness to participate actively in the transformation rather than simply waiting for external solutions. Michael's breakthrough came not through passive prayer, but through remaining open to opportunities that initially seemed unrelated to his real problems. Dr. Patricia Williams, a pediatrician in Denver, experienced this same principle when her teenage daughter began struggling with severe anxiety and depression. Traditional therapy and medication provided minimal improvement, and Patricia felt helpless watching her normally vibrant child withdraw from activities, friends, and family. As a medical professional, Patricia trusted scientific approaches and felt skeptical about religious solutions. But when medical interventions plateaued, her desperation opened her to possibilities she'd previously dismissed. A colleague mentioned Saint Anthony's reputation for helping families in crisis, suggesting that prayer might complement rather than replace medical treatment. Patricia's first attempts at prayer felt awkward and artificial. She wasn't comfortable with formal religious language or elaborate devotions, but late one night, sitting beside her daughter's bed and watching her sleep fitfully, she found herself speaking simply and directly to Saint Anthony. "I don't know how to help her," she whispered. "I can diagnose medical conditions, but I can't heal whatever's happening in her heart. If you really help families, please show me what she needs that I'm not seeing." The alchemical transformation began with Patricia's own awareness rather than external changes. Over the following days, she started noticing aspects of her daughter's struggle that her medical training had actually obscured. She'd been so focused on symptoms and treatments that she'd missed the underlying isolation and perfectionism that were feeding her daughter's anxiety. Instead of increasing therapeutic interventions, Patricia began creating opportunities for simple connection, cooking together, taking walks without discussing problems, sharing stories from her own adolescence. She discovered that her daughter's healing required not more professional help, but more authentic relationship. The breakthrough came when her daughter finally felt safe enough to reveal the real source of her distress: overwhelming pressure to meet academic expectations that would secure her acceptance to medical school, following in Patricia's footsteps. The anxiety wasn't a mysterious chemical imbalance. It was her sensitive spirit rebelling against a future that felt imposed rather than chosen. This revelation led to conversations that transformed both their relationship and her daughter's sense of self. When the pressure to pursue medicine was removed, her natural creativity flourished. She began writing poetry, discovered a talent for photography, and slowly emerged from the depression that had clouded her personality for months. Patricia's prayer to Saint Anthony had been answered, but not through the medical miracle she'd originally expected. Instead, she received something more valuable: insight into her daughter's true needs and wisdom to provide what healing actually required. The saint's intercession worked by enhancing Patricia's capacity to see and respond to her daughter's authentic self. This pattern appears consistently in authentic experiences of Saint Anthony's help. Rather than forcing external circumstances to change according to our demands, his intercession often transforms our perception and response to existing situations. We begin seeing solutions that were always available but previously invisible to us. The alchemy of answered prayer operates on this principle of enhanced awareness coupled with divinely guided action. Saint Anthony doesn't typically violate natural laws to produce supernatural results. He reveals supernatural possibilities hidden within natural circumstances. But accessing this alchemical process requires what might be called surrendered engagement, releasing control over specific outcomes while remaining actively engaged in positive responses to whatever emerges. This balance between surrender and action challenges our normal approaches to problem solving. Most people swing between two extremes when facing difficult situations. They either exhaust themselves trying to control every variable through human effort alone, or they retreat into passive resignation, hoping someone else will fix their problems. Neither approach creates optimal conditions for receiving Saint Anthony's help. Surrendered engagement offers a third way: trusting divine wisdom to coordinate circumstances while taking every appropriate action that presents itself. This approach requires moment-by-moment discernment about when to act and when to wait, when to push forward and when to step back. As we prepare to enter into prayer with Saint Anthony, remember that you're not just requesting intervention in your circumstances, you're opening yourself to participate in the alchemy of divine love. Your problems may be transformed not by being eliminated, but by being revealed as doorways to discoveries you never could have made otherwise. The prayers we're about to share create space for this alchemical process to unfold in your life. But they work most powerfully when combined with alert attention to new possibilities and courageous response to opportunities that align with your deepest values and authentic purpose. Are you ready to participate in the alchemy of answered prayer? Are you prepared to discover that your greatest problems might be preparation for your most meaningful solutions? Saint Anthony is waiting to guide you through this transformation, but the journey requires your active, trusting participation every step of the way. The most profound miracles through Saint Anthony's intercession occur not when we demand immediate results, but when we learn to dance with divine timing, that mysterious rhythm of heaven that rarely matches our human schedules, but always serves our deepest good. This sacred dance requires a type of surrender that most people find counterintuitive: releasing control while remaining fully engaged, trusting divine wisdom while taking practical action, and accepting delayed answers while maintaining unwavering faith. Divine timing operates according to principles that challenge everything our achievement-oriented culture teaches about getting results. We're trained to believe that faster is better, that delayed gratification equals failure, and that good things come to those who push hardest. But Saint Anthony's interventions consistently demonstrate that the most transformative help often requires periods of seeming delay that are actually periods of preparation. Consider Elena Martinez, a nurse in Phoenix, whose 26-year-old son, Carlos, had been battling addiction for 8 years. She'd tried everything: interventions, treatment programs, tough love, enabling compassion, family therapy, and countless prayers to various saints. Each approach brought temporary hope, followed by devastating relapse. After Carlos's 4th stint in rehabilitation ended with him stealing money from her purse to buy drugs, Elena felt her faith fracturing. "I've been praying to Saint Anthony for 3 years," she told her sister through tears. "People say he answers prayers quickly, but nothing's changed. Carlos is getting worse, not better. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe some situations are just hopeless." Elena's sister, Sophia, had her own history with Saint Anthony's help and recognized something Elena couldn't see from inside her crisis. "Sometimes," Sophia said gently, "Saint Anthony's biggest miracles require the longest preparation. Maybe he's not ignoring your prayers. Maybe he's preparing something better than what you originally asked for." That conversation planted a seed that would grow into profound understanding over the following months. Instead of abandoning prayer or intensifying her petitions, Elena began approaching Saint Anthony differently. Rather than focusing on specific outcomes for Carlos, she started asking for wisdom to respond appropriately to whatever emerged, strength to maintain healthy boundaries, and grace to love her son without enabling his destruction. This shift from demanding specific results to seeking divine guidance created space for a process that ultimately proved more healing than anything Elena had previously attempted. As she released her desperate grip on controlling Carlos's choices, she began making different choices herself. She stopped covering for his mistakes at work, stopped lending him money, and stopped allowing his crisis to dominate every family gathering. These boundaries felt cruel initially, but they were actually expressions of deeper love, love that refused to participate in his self-destruction. The change in Elena's responses triggered unexpected changes in Carlos. Without his mother's predictable rescue patterns, he faced consequences that previous interventions had inadvertently prevented. More importantly, he began encountering people and situations that Elena's well-meaning interference had been blocking. After 6 months of Elena's new approach, Carlos hit a different kind of bottom, not just physical and financial desperation, but genuine recognition that his choices were destroying everything he actually valued. This recognition led him to a recovery program run by former addicts who understood his struggle from the inside. But here's what made this program different from previous attempts. Carlos chose it himself, not because family pressure or legal requirements forced his participation. His motivation came from internal recognition rather than external consequences, creating the foundation for lasting change rather than temporary compliance. 18 months later, Carlos celebrated 2 years of sobriety, not because Elena's prayers had finally been answered, but because Saint Anthony had been working all along to prepare conditions for authentic healing. The apparent delay in answering her prayers had actually been time necessary for both Carlos and Elena to become people who could participate in real recovery rather than mere behavioral modification. Elena's experience illustrates why divine timing rarely matches human expectations. True healing often requires changes in multiple people simultaneously, and these changes can't be rushed or forced. Saint Anthony's intercession works within the natural rhythms of human growth and development, creating opportunities for genuine transformation rather than superficial solutions. But understanding divine timing requires distinguishing between patience and passivity. Elena didn't simply wait for Carlos to change. She actively participated in her own transformation, which created space for his authentic recovery. This active patience represents one of the most challenging aspects of working with Saint Anthony's intercession. Dr. Janet Morrison, a veterinarian in rural Montana, learned about active patience through circumstances that initially seemed to contradict everything she believed about Saint Anthony's power. When her practice faced closure due to equipment failures that would cost more to repair than she could afford, she turned to the saint with desperate urgency. "Saint Anthony," she prayed, "I need help immediately." This community depends on my clinic for their animals' care. If I close, the nearest veterinarian is 2 hours away. Please help me find the money for these repairs quickly." Weeks passed with no obvious answers. Equipment continued failing, her savings dwindled toward zero, and clients began making reluctant arrangements with distant veterinarians. Janet's faith wavered as each day brought her closer to closing the practice she'd spent 15 years building. But Saint Anthony was orchestrating something far more complex than emergency funding. Dr. Morrison's reputation for compassionate animal care had reached Dr. Marcus Webb, a recently retired veterinarian in Seattle who had been searching for meaningful ways to use his remaining years. Through a series of conversations initiated by mutual colleagues, Dr. Webb learned about Janet's situation and felt moved to investigate personally. His visit to Montana coincided with Janet's darkest hour, the day she'd finally decided to announce the clinic's closure. Instead of finding a failing practice, Dr. Webb discovered a skilled veterinarian whose heart for rural animal care matched his own values perfectly. Rather than simply providing emergency funding, he proposed something neither of them had anticipated, a partnership that would modernize the clinic while preserving its community focus. Dr. Webb brought not just financial resources, but decades of experience, modern equipment, and connections with veterinary schools that could provide ongoing support for rural practice. What had begun as Janet's desperate prayer for quick repair money evolved into a complete transformation that secured the clinic's future far beyond what emergency funding could have accomplished. The months of apparent delay had been necessary preparation time, not just for Dr. Webb to discover Janet's situation, but for both veterinarians to reach points in their lives where partnership made sense. Janet's willingness to maintain quality care despite failing equipment demonstrated the character that attracted Dr. Webb's investment. His recent retirement created availability that wouldn't have existed earlier. Divine timing had coordinated circumstances involving multiple people across different states, aligning their needs and resources in ways that served everyone's highest good. The delay that had tested Janet's faith was actually the incubation period necessary for a miracle far greater than what she'd originally requested. This principle of divine timing extends beyond individual situations to encompass the broader rhythms of spiritual growth and development. Saint Anthony's intercession often works to prepare us for blessings we're not yet ready to receive, solutions we're not yet equipped to recognize, or opportunities we're not yet mature enough to handle responsibly. Rebecca Foster, a single mother in Baltimore, experienced this preparatory aspect of divine timing when her prayer for financial stability led to a series of experiences that initially seemed unrelated to her request. Struggling to support her 2 young children on a part-time income while completing nursing school, she felt overwhelmed by the impossibility of balancing education, parenting, and survival. Her prayer to Saint Anthony was specific. "Please help me find better-paying work that won't interfere with my studies or time with my children." She expected either a higher-paying part-time position or some form of financial assistance that would reduce her economic pressure. Instead, what she received was an invitation to participate in a community garden project sponsored by her children's school. The project required significant time investment with no immediate financial return, and Rebecca's first instinct was to decline. But something about the organizer's passion for teaching children about nutrition and self-sufficiency resonated with values she'd held since childhood, but had nearly forgotten in her struggle for survival. Rebecca's participation in the garden project connected her with other parents facing similar challenges, created opportunities for her children to learn practical skills, and introduced her to Maria Santos, a local entrepreneur who had been searching for someone to help develop a community-based nutrition education program. Maria's program needed someone with Rebecca's combination of nursing knowledge, parenting experience, and genuine care for community welfare. The position offered flexible scheduling that accommodated both school and parenting responsibilities, paid significantly better than her previous work, and aligned perfectly with her personal values and professional goals. But here's what made this opportunity so remarkable. It required exactly the combination of skills, experience, and community connections that Rebecca had developed during her months of struggle. Her nursing education provided medical credibility. Her parenting challenges had given her practical wisdom about family nutrition on limited budgets, and her participation in the garden project had demonstrated her commitment to community welfare. If Saint Anthony had simply provided the better-paying work Rebecca originally requested, she might have missed the opportunity to discover her true calling in community health education. The apparent delay in answering her prayer had been time necessary for her to develop capabilities and connections that made the perfect opportunity possible. This reveals another crucial aspect of divine timing. It often requires us to become different people before we can receive the help we're seeking. Our prayers may be answered not by changing our circumstances, but by preparing us to handle different circumstances that serve our deeper purposes. Understanding this preparatory function of divine timing can transform how we experience periods of waiting. Instead of interpreting delays as evidence that our prayers aren't being heard, we can recognize them as opportunities for growth that makes us ready for better solutions than we originally imagined. But this recognition requires developing what spiritual teachers call prophetic patience, the ability to see present struggles as preparation for future breakthroughs. This type of patience isn't passive resignation, but active trust that engages fully with whatever opportunities present themselves while maintaining faith in divine coordination of larger patterns. As we move toward our time of prayer with Saint Anthony, remember that your willingness to align with divine timing may be more important than the specific words you speak. Some prayers are answered immediately because immediate answers serve our highest good. Others require periods of preparation that develop our capacity to receive and steward more meaningful solutions. Your prayer today might be the beginning of a process that unfolds over months or years, touching multiple lives and creating benefits you can't yet imagine. Or it might trigger immediate changes that have been waiting for exactly this moment of sincere request. Either way, Saint Anthony is already at work in your situation, preparing circumstances and hearts for whatever form of help will serve you best. Are you ready to surrender your timeline to divine wisdom? Are you prepared to participate actively in whatever process unfolds, trusting that Saint Anthony's intercession operates according to love's perfect timing rather than anxiety's urgent demands? The prayer we're about to share together creates space for miracles that honor both your immediate needs and your eternal good. But before we enter into that sacred time, I want you to pause and reflect on this question. What if the delay you've been experiencing in some area of your life isn't God ignoring your prayers, but God preparing something better than what you originally asked for? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to keep faith alive during their own season of waiting. Most people approach Saint Anthony with generic requests that produce generic results. They ask for help with my problems, or blessings on my family, or guidance in my life. Prayers so vague that even when they're answered, the responses are difficult to recognize or celebrate. But Saint Anthony's most dramatic interventions consistently occur when people bring him specific situations, detailed concerns, and precise requests that reflect genuine faith in his power to intercede in particular circumstances. This specificity isn't about limiting divine creativity or dictating exactly how prayers should be answered. Instead, it demonstrates the kind of detailed trust that creates optimal conditions for miraculous intervention. When we bring Saint Anthony's specific situations, we're not just asking for help. We're declaring our belief that he cares about the intimate details of our lives and possesses the power to influence particular outcomes. Consider Thomas Chen, a software engineer in Austin whose elderly father was facing emergency heart surgery with a specialist who had never performed the specific procedure his condition required. The surgeon was competent and well-trained, but lacked experience with the particular type of repair Thomas's father needed. Other specialists with relevant experience had waiting lists that extended months beyond what his father's condition could tolerate. Thomas's first impulse was to pray generally for his father's healing and the surgery's success, But something prompted him to be more specific in his request to Saint Anthony. Instead of asking broadly for medical blessing, he made a precise petition. "Saint Anthony, please help us find a cardiac surgeon who has successfully performed this exact procedure many times and is available to operate within the next 2 weeks." The specificity of this request focused Thomas's attention in ways that general prayers for healing never could have accomplished. Instead of simply hoping for the best, he began actively researching specialists who met his precise criteria. This research led him to Dr. Amanda Rodriguez at Johns Hopkins, who had pioneered the very technique his father required. Dr. Rodriguez's schedule was completely booked for the next 4 months. But when Thomas called her office and explained his father's specific situation, something unexpected happened. She had just received a cancellation for the following week from a patient whose condition had improved enough to delay surgery. More remarkably, she had been hoping to perform this particular procedure again soon because she was preparing to teach it to other surgeons and wanted to refresh her technique. The surgery was scheduled within 10 days of Thomas's specific prayer. Dr. Rodriguez performed the procedure flawlessly, and Thomas's father recovered faster than anyone had anticipated. But the most striking aspect wasn't just the successful outcome, it was how perfectly every detail aligned with Thomas's precise request. This alignment wasn't coincidence, but demonstration of how specific faith creates conditions for specific miracles. When we approach Saint Anthony with detailed requests, we're not trying to control divine will, but aligning our prayers with divine precision. Heaven operates with infinite attention to detail, and our specific prayers help us recognize and receive that detailed care. Dr. Sarah Williams, a family physician in Portland, discovered this principle when her teenage daughter, Emma, faced a crisis that required more than general parental prayers. Emma had been accepted to her dream college, but learned just weeks before enrollment that a clerical error had eliminated her financial aid package. Without assistance, the family couldn't afford tuition, but it was too late to apply for aid at other institutions. Sarah's initial prayers were understandably general. "Please help Emma find a way to attend college." But as days passed without resolution, she felt prompted to be more specific in her approach to Saint Anthony. Drawing from her medical training's emphasis on precise diagnosis and targeted treatment, she crafted a detailed petition. "Saint Anthony," she prayed, "Emma needs exactly $23,000 in financial assistance to attend Portland State this fall. She's already been accepted, her academic record deserves support, and this education will prepare her to serve others as a teacher. Please help us find this specific amount through legitimate sources before the August 15th enrollment deadline." The precision of this request focused Sarah's attention on specific opportunities rather than vague possibilities. She began researching local scholarships she'd previously overlooked, discovered emergency grant programs she didn't know existed, and learned about work-study options that could contribute to the exact amount needed. But the breakthrough came through a connection that perfectly illustrated how specific prayers align with specific solutions. Sarah's colleague, Dr. Martinez, mentioned that her own daughter had received a substantial scholarship from a foundation Sarah had never heard of, one that specialized in supporting first-generation college students pursuing teaching careers. Emma fit the foundation's criteria perfectly, but applications had officially closed months earlier. However, when Sarah called to inquire, she learned that one recipient had recently declined their award to attend a different institution. The foundation needed to reallocate exactly $23,000 before their fiscal year ended in 2 weeks. Emma received the full scholarship amount on August 12th, exactly what Sarah had requested, precisely when it was needed. The specificity of the prayer had helped Sarah recognize an opportunity that aligned perfectly with their detailed need. This principle of specific faith extends beyond financial or medical situations to encompass every area where Saint Anthony's intercession can influence outcomes. The key is learning to translate vague concerns into precise requests that reflect genuine faith in his power to address particular circumstances. As you continue developing your own relationship with Saint Anthony, Remember that the goal isn't to receive special treatment that exempts you from normal human challenges. The goal is to discover divine presence that accompanies you through every experience, provides wisdom for every decision, and connects you with purposes that serve the common good rather than just individual advantage. Your prayers today are the beginning of relationship that can deepen and mature throughout your lifetime. Each experience of Saint Anthony's intercession becomes foundation for greater trust, deeper communication, and more generous service to others who need what you've received through his powerful help. As our time together draws to a close, I want you to understand that what we've shared isn't just information about Saint Anthony or techniques for effective prayer. We've participated together in something far more significant, the beginning or deepening of a relationship that can transform every aspect of your spiritual life and practical circumstances for years to come. Saint Anthony of Padua isn't just a historical figure who worked miracles centuries ago. He's a living spiritual companion whose love for you is as real today as it was during his earthly ministry in medieval Portugal and Italy. His power to intercede in your circumstances hasn't diminished with time. If anything, his heavenly position provides him with greater access to divine resources than he possessed during his physical lifetime. But relationship with Saint Anthony, like any meaningful relationship, requires ongoing nurturing, consistent communication, and grateful acknowledgement of the care you receive. The specific prayer we shared together was important, but it was also just the beginning of conversation that can enrich your entire spiritual journey. As you move forward from this prayer experience, carry with you the key insights that can help you recognize and receive Saint Anthony's continuing intercession in your life. Remember that his help often comes through ordinary human channels, phone calls, conversations, opportunities, and coincidences that aren't coincidental at all. Divine intervention rarely announces itself with supernatural fanfare, but it consistently reveals itself through circumstances that align too perfectly to be explained by chance alone. Stay alert to solutions that don't match your original expectations, but serve your deeper needs more completely than what you initially requested. Saint Anthony's wisdom surpasses human understanding, and his intercession often provides better answers than we knew how to ask for. Remain open to help that arrives through timing that doesn't match your preferred schedule. Divine timing serves purposes beyond immediate relief, often providing preparation time that makes you ready for solutions that wouldn't have worked earlier. Be willing to receive assistance through sources you might not have chosen, family members whose capabilities you've underestimated, acquaintances whose advice you might normally dismiss, or opportunities that seem too small to solve big problems but prove to be perfectly designed for your particular situation. Most importantly, remember that Saint Anthony's intercession in your life isn't just about solving your problems. It's about deepening your relationship with divine love and increasing your capacity to serve as an instrument of that same love in other people's lives. Every miracle you receive through his powerful prayers carries with it a calling to become the kind of person who notices others' needs and responds with the same generosity heaven has shown to you. Your answered prayers become someone else's testimony of hope. Your practical solutions become resources others can adapt to their circumstances. Your restored faith becomes encouragement that sustains others through their own seasons of difficulty. This is how Saint Anthony's intercession multiplies beyond individual situations to create networks of mutual support, communities of shared faith, and cultures of divine love that transform entire neighborhoods, workplaces, and families. Before you leave this sacred space we've created together, I want to invite you to make several commitments that will help you receive the full benefit of your connection with Saint Anthony. First, commit to maintaining daily communication with him, even if just for a few moments each morning or evening. Share your gratitudes, concerns, decisions, and simple observations about life. Treat him like the trusted friend he truly wants to be for you. Second, commit to recognizing and acknowledging his intercession when it appears in your circumstances. Don't let pride, skepticism, or familiarity cause you to overlook the miracles he's arranging on your behalf. Third, commit to sharing your experiences of his help with others who need hope, encouragement, or practical guidance for their own challenges. Your testimony becomes someone else's introduction to Saint Anthony's powerful compassion. Finally, commit to serving as an instrument of divine love in situations where you can provide for others what Saint Anthony has provided for you. This doesn't mean solving everyone's problems, but it does mean maintaining sensitivity to needs you're equipped to meet and responding generously when opportunities for service present themselves. If this video has blessed you, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Like this video to encourage others to discover Saint Anthony's powerful intercession, and subscribe to this channel so we can continue building a community of believers who support each other through prayer, testimony, and practical encouragement. Leave a comment below sharing how you plan to continue your relationship with Saint Anthony, or tell us about any experiences of his help you've already received. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to maintain faith during their own challenging circumstances. Remember that Saint Anthony is listening to your heart even now, carrying your needs to God with all the love and power of his heavenly intercession. Trust his care for you, cooperate with whatever process of help he initiates in your life, and remain open to miracles that may be disguised as ordinary kindness, but are actually expressions of extraordinary divine love. Your journey with Saint Anthony of Padua has begun or deepened through our time together today. May his powerful intercession bring you every blessing you need, connect you with divine purposes that give your life profound meaning, and transform you into an instrument of the same miraculous love that never stops working in our world. Saint Anthony of Padua, pray for us all. Amen.